Welcome. This now begins part 2 of our webinar, LCAP Nuts and Bolts for Charter Schools. In this session, we will review the annual update, goals, actions, and services, and the demonstration of increased or improved services in the new LCAP template. We will now turn to the annual update. You will note that this section has been moved to an earlier part of the plan to reflect its impact on the planning process. The annual update must be completed each year as prescribed by Education Code. As in the past, the annual update requires a comparison of what was planned and what actually occurred. The update is reported by individual goal. A significant change in the annual update is the addition of the analysis section. This reflects the focus on continuous improvement as defined in the next slide. As you can see from this definition, continuous improvement is an ongoing process that is sustained over time. The annual update plays a key role in that process. The instructions make it clear that the planned actions and services must be copied verbatim from the prior year's LCAP. Any changes in implementation are reflected in the actual outcomes, actions, and services and expenditures. They also make it clear that the actual outcomes must be reported for each planned expected outcome. As in the past, planned actions and services and budgeted expenditures are reported on the left-hand side of the template, with actual actions, services, and estimated actual expenditures reported next to them. This slide shows which sections require verbatim information from the prior year and where information is reported in the update. This is an example of how one LEA reported their outcomes. By clearly indicating whether or not the outcome was met, they have made it easy to read and comprehensible for the reader. This slide provides an example of reporting on actions and services and estimated actual expenditures. Planned actions and budgeted expenditures are reported exactly as in the approved LCAP. And actual actions and estimated actual expenditures reflect what actually occurred during the year. The analysis section begins with a description of the overall implementation of the actions and services included in the goal. Next is a review of the overall effectiveness of actions and services supporting each goal. This might address the impact on different groups of students, variances in effectiveness of different components of a particular action, and possible reasons for the effectiveness or lack of effectiveness of various actions. The next part of analysis section asks for an explanation of material differences between budgeted and estimated actual expenditures. This section should address any budget changes that are significant and important for stakeholders to know and important in making future decisions. Finally, this section asks for a description of any changes made to the LCAP for the coming year based on this analysis. It also asks to identify where those changes can be found in the 2017-18 LCAP. Here is a summary of what is required in the analysis section of the annual update and what questions your responses should address. The key change in stakeholder engagement is the elimination of 2 of the 4 boxes previously required. Now there are only 2 questions that must be addressed. It is important to understand that stakeholder engagement is required annually, so this section will be new each year to reflect the current year's engagement. Note that the instructions specifically address the required groups for charter schools, which differ slightly from the school district and county offices. The template now requires responses to the 2 prompts above. What is the process for involvement of stakeholders in the LCAP and annual update? And what was the impact of that involvement? Now we will turn to Goals, Actions, and Services section. There have been a lot of questions about the new template moving the LCAP to a 3-year plan. As you can see in this chart, The key place where this is evident is in the section including goals, actions, and services. If an action or service is planned to continue over a 3-year period, that can be indicated in this section. As you can see, the plan summary and budget summary are completed annually, as is the annual update. Stakeholder engagement is also addressed annually, as is the demonstration of increased or improved services. However, this historical context for this section is kept over the 3 years. Goals, actions, and services must be included for all students and student groups in the state priorities. For charter schools, the years addressed in the LCAP may align with the term of the charter school's budget. This should be specified in the LCAP. As in the past, the goals must indicate which state priorities or local priorities they apply to. A change this year is the section noting whether the goal is new, modified, or unchanged. The identified needs section is the same, except it refers to the use of the evaluation rubrics from the California dashboard as a source of data for determining needs. You will note a change in how measurable outcomes are written. The metric and the baseline level used to measure progress are separated in the template. If your outcomes were written in narrative form last year and they were written in measurable terms, you will find that information needed to complete the template will be in the narrative. Here is an example of how one LEA wrote their measurable outcomes in the previous template format. In the new template, the outcomes are written in the provided table with the identified metric, baseline data, and 3 years of outcomes. In this example, you can see they also included an additional goal for English learners under the A to G rate metric. There is a significant change in how actions and services section are reflected. You will see there are 2 places where actions and services can be written. The first is for actions and services that do not contribute to the increased or improved services requirement. These are actions and services that are meant for all students or student groups not included in the unduplicated pupil groups. You will note that the services for students with disabilities are included here. That is because students with disabilities are not an unduplicated pupil group and that they have a right to a basic educational program that provides access to the core program based on the individual education plan. The second box is specifically for actions or services that do contribute to the increased or improved services requirement. These are services designed with the needs or conditions of English learners, low income, and foster youth in mind, and are meant to ensure that they meet the outcomes in the state or local priorities. These services may be limited to one or more unduplicated pupil group, or they may be provided on a charter-wide basis, but they need to increase or improve services for unduplicated pupils in comparison to services for all students. This screenshot focuses on the key change in this section. You can see the word "or" is in between the 2 boxes. This means the action must apply to one or the other, and you may not check both boxes. Again, the first box is for actions and services that are not included as contributing to the increased or improved services requirement, and the second box is for actions and services that are included as contributing to meeting the increased or improved services requirement for the unduplicated pupil groups. These are the services designed with the needs, conditions, or circumstances of the low-income students, foster youth, or English learners in mind. Next to students to be served, you may check one or more boxes to indicate which groups the actions is focused on. Specific schools may be listed. In both of these sections, the charter school can identify the location or the specific grade span if the action only applies to certain grades. For actions not contributing to the increased or improved services requirement, you may identify all students or particular student groups under the students to be served or specific schools or grade spans under locations. You will notice specific information addressing charter schools, which notes that a charter school with multiple sites may identify specific schools. For those with a single site, either all schools or specific schools is acceptable. These actions may be provided on a charter-wide basis, or they can be limited to one or more of the groups. Please refer to the note from the instructions regarding charter schools. A charter school with a single site may choose either LEA or school-wide. For charters with multiple sites, LEA-wide should be marked. For actions contributing to the increased or improved services requirement, you will identify the students to be served. However, this will include only students from one or more of the unduplicated pupil groups. In this case, you will identify the scope of services as limited to the unduplicated group or district or school-wide. As noted in the instructions, charter schools operating a single site may select either LEA-wide or school-wide. Keep in mind that any action contributing to the increased or improved requirement that is provided charter-wide must be justified later in the plan to show how it is principally directed to the unduplicated pupil group. The same instructions apply to charters for location of services as noted in the previous slide. This is where the charter school will indicate if the action or service is new for the LCAP year, or if it reflects a previous action that has been modified, or if it is unchanged from the prior year. There is no need to copy an action if it is unchanged. You may simply check unchanged in the box for that year. If the budgeted amount is a fixed cost, that does not need to be changed. However, if the costs are anticipated to change over a 3-year period, that should be included. The instructions include the information above specific to charter schools. As you can see, a charter school may align its LCAP with the term of the budget submitted to the authorizer. If year 2 and/or year 3 is not applicable, charter schools must specify that in the template. We will look at a few examples to show how different actions are reflected in the LCAP. This is an example of an action not contributing to increased or improved services. It is for all students at all schools, which you can see is indicated at the top. It is a new action in 2017-18 and then will be modified in the following year and remain unchanged in 2019 and 20. This is another example of an action not contributing to increased or improved services requirement, but is focused on a single subgroup, students with disabilities, and is also focused on grades K through 5 only. This action is included as contributing to increased or improved services for unduplicated pupils. In this case, it is focused on all 3 of the unduplicated groups as noted in the students to be served. It is also being provided on a school-wide and LEA-wide level as noted in the scope of service. Because this action contributes to increased or improved services, it must be included in the last plan section, the demonstration of increased or improved services. And because it is offered on a district-wide or school-wide basis, there must be a description of how it is principally directed towards and effective in meeting the charter's goals for unduplicated pupils. For a charter school with only one site, either LEA-wide or school-wide may be checked. This is an example of another action that is contributing to the increased or improved services requirement, but is focused on English learners at the selected schools as indicated. In most cases, the specific schools box would not apply to charter schools since they are generally single sites. Expenditures for each action are listed for each year. Expenditures must include the funding source and the budget classification. If the same expenditure is included in more than one action, it must be indicated as a duplicated expenditure and include a reference indicating where else it is included in the LCAP. This slide shows how expenditures are reported. The action is for all unduplicated groups. It is being offered on an LEA-wide basis at all schools and is unchanged in years 2 and 3. You will note that the funding source and the budget categories are identified. If an action is unchanged and the cost will remain the same, it is not necessary to repeat it. However, if it is a cost that is expected to change, such as salaries, those changes should be noted in the subsequent years. The next section requires the LEA to demonstrate how it is increasing and improving the services for the unduplicated pupil groups. As in the past, the first step is identifying the estimated amount of supplemental and concentration grant funds the charter school will receive and the percentage by which they are expected to increase or improve services for low-income students, English learners, and foster youth as compared to services for all students. As noted in the instructions, this information will be retained for 3 years of the LCAP. The determination of the estimated amount of the supplemental and concentration funds is based on the state regulations and has not changed from prior years. The percentage used on this page is also based on the California Code of Regulations calculation, which has not changed from prior years. The first question asks how all the actions in the LCAP are identified as contributing to increased or improved services by at least the percentage identified in the box on the right-hand side of the page for unduplicated pupils as compared for services for all students. The second prompt requires the LEA to identify each action or service provided on a charter-wide basis that was indicated as contributing to the increased or improved services requirement and describe how each of these use of funds is principally directed towards and effective in meeting the charter's goals for the unduplicated pupils in the state and local priorities. To demonstrate that an action is principally directed towards the unduplicated pupil groups, the LEA must show it considered factors such as the needs, conditions, or circumstances of those pupils, how the LEA took those factors into consideration, and how the LEA expects the service to support the conclusion that it will be effective in meeting LCAP goals for unduplicated pupils. This is the final section of the new LCAP template. This is the site to download the LCAP template from the California Department of Education website. You will find additional information regarding charter schools' LCAPs on the California Department of Education's LCAP FAQs. Topics in the FAQs include the following: requirements for charter schools to address state priority areas, statutory requirement for the LCAP and annual update for charter schools, timelines for charter schools' LCAPs, and responsibilities of charter school authorizers. If you have any questions about your LCAP, you should contact your authorizer. Thank you for joining us for this overview of the 2017-18 through 2019-20 LCAP for charter schools. We hope you have found this helpful.